A low, icy fog crept along the ground as Daniel drove down the narrow, winding road, the only road leading into the tiny, isolated village of Blackwood. He'd never heard of Blackwood before he received the letter, an invitation to claim an inheritance from a distant, unknown relative. The air felt heavier the closer he got, like something unseen was pressing down on him, and the road seemed to stretch on forever, looping like it was trapping him in a labyrinth. Then as he rounded a final bend, his headlights caught something, a dark figure standing in the middle of the road. Daniel slammed on the brakes, the car screeching to a halt, but the figure had vanished by the time he blinked. Shaken, he gripped the steering wheel, looking around. Was it his imagination, or had he really seen someone there? He decided to push on, but an uneasy chill had settled over him, prickling at the back of his neck. Finally, the village appeared, though it looked like something out of another century, lost and decaying under the weight of time. He stopped his car in front of the only building with any light, a dimly lit inn. The innkeeper stared at him with hollow eyes and handed him a key, whispering in a cracked voice, "Beware the house. It keeps what it claims." Ignoring the innkeeper's warning, Daniel ventured up the hill toward the looming mansion that waited for him, surrounded by a twisted, lifeless forest. With every step, he felt the wind whispering his name, calling him toward the crumbling structure, urging him closer. As he approached, he saw something in the upper window, a flicker of movement, a shadow watching him. The door groaned as it opened, and the scent of mildew and rot clawed at his throat. The house seemed to breathe as he stepped inside, the wooden floors creaking under his weight. He called out, "Is anyone here?" Only to be met with silence, but it felt like the silence was alive, filled with the faintest echo of a response. In the grand hallway, a portrait caught his eye, a man who looked unsettlingly familiar. The longer he stared, the more the eyes in the painting seemed to follow him, and he could swear the face twisted into a smirk just before he looked away. Pushing down a sense of dread, he climbed the staircase, drawn to the faint sound of footsteps above, as if someone or something was pacing, waiting for him. At the top of the stairs, he found a door slightly ajar, revealing a candle-lit room beyond. He hesitated, but something compelled him forward, his pulse pounding as he pushed the door open. Inside was a single wooden table with a single candle, and there, in the middle of the table, lay an old yellowed envelope with his name written on it in a handwriting he recognized his own. His hands trembled as he tore open the letter, his eyes scanning the words, each sentence sending a chill down his spine. It read, "Welcome home, Daniel. You've come back, just like you promised." He felt a searing pain in his head, a flood of images he couldn't understand. Memories of the house, of living there, of being someone else entirely. And then he remembered. He'd been here before, but not in this life. Decades ago, he was the man in the portrait, the one who made a pact to live again, to reclaim his soul by luring himself, his reincarnated self, back to the cursed house. The door slammed shut, locking him in as the walls seemed to close in around him, and he could feel something clawing at his mind, something darker and older, trying to take control. The candle flickered, casting eerie shadows that moved like twisted limbs reaching out to him. He heard a voice identical to his own, whispering, "It's time to finish what we started." His own face grinned at him from the mirror across the room, the reflection moving when he didn't. He stumbled backward, feeling a force pulling him closer to the mirror, and he realized with terror that he wasn't the one looking at the reflection. The reflection was looking at him. Just as he felt himself slipping into darkness, he managed to turn and run, banging on the door, begging to escape, to leave the house before it consumed him completely. But the walls echoed back only laughter, his own laughter, filling the air around him. As his vision faded, he understood the innkeeper's words. The house had claimed him, like it had before, and would again, repeating forever, trapping each version of him in a loop of endless horror. It started with a soft tap on the wall in the middle of the night. At first, Emily thought it was just the house settling, but the taps grew louder and more frequent, like someone was knocking, waiting to be let in. Then came the whispers, faint at first, so quiet she couldn't make out the words, but chilling enough to send shivers down her spine. She turned on her bedside lamp, heart racing, but the room was empty, as it had always been. Every night the tapping continued, always at exactly 3 a.m., and the whispers became clearer. She heard her name, Emily, spoken in a voice so familiar, yet so wrong, like it came from someone who had been dead for years. Desperate for answers, she started researching the history of her new home, but the more she dug, the more unsettling it became. The house was built on the site of an old asylum, one that had burned down in a mysterious fire, killing dozens of patients who were never properly identified. The rumors were the worst part. Some of the asylum's most dangerous patients were said to have disappeared, their bodies never found. One night, she decided to confront the source of the noise, armed with nothing but a flashlight and a trembling resolve. She followed the taps down the long, dark hallway, her breath catching with every step. The closer she got, the more oppressive the air became, until she reached the basement door, which was slightly ajar, a faint light seeping from the crack. When she opened it, the room was empty, nothing but old furniture and dust. But then the whispers returned, this time louder, frantic. "You should have never come," they warned. Emily turned in horror, realizing the whispers weren't from the walls. They were coming from inside the room with her. The air grew thick, suffocating, as a cold hand brushed against her shoulder, sending a jolt of terror through her body. She spun around, her flashlight revealing nothing but shadows, but she could feel them, watching. Then she heard the tap, one final tap, as if something was counting down to something far worse. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered, then went out completely, plunging her into pitch-black darkness. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears as the whispers became clearer, louder, until she could understand them perfectly. "We're still here, Emily. We've been waiting." Frozen in place, she could barely breathe as the walls around her seemed to close in, the whispers coming from every direction. And then, in a voice too familiar to ignore, one last whisper cut through the silence. "You should have never left us." The flashlight flickered on again, just for a moment, but when it illuminated the basement, Emily was gone. And the tapping, the whispers, they never stopped.